this computer. All right. Welcome, everyone, to our 2020 virtual PWS Family Conference. We're thrilled to have you joining us today. Today's presentation will share information about a new therapeutic, Pitolisant, which was recently approved in the US for the treatment of narcolepsy in adults. Harmony Biosciences is now preparing a phase 2 study to evaluate the effectiveness of Pitolisant for treating daytime sleepiness in PWS, and will be enrolling people with PWS into this study soon. To tell you more about Pitolisant and a little bit about the upcoming study, I would like to give you Albena Patroneva from Harmony Biosciences.
Thank you very much, Susan, and I would like to thank the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research for inviting us. I will talk about Pitolisant, and this is the outline of my presentation. But again, it has been a journey, and we have been thinking and talking about Prader-Willi. Actually, the interest for Pitolisant even preceded the formation of our company. So I'll do a short introduction about that. So, but pretty much the outline of my talk will be, I'll talk a little bit about what is Pitolisant, how does it work, why is this a different and new treatment that may become available if the studies are positive. Then we'll talk a little bit about histamine, because again, people know about histamine, but they know very little about histamine in the brain. And I would like to expand a little bit on more on that, because again, this is something that is very pertinent to our drug. Then I'll talk a little bit of why did we decide to develop Pitolisant in Prader-Willi and what is the scientific rationale for us going there. And I'll finish my presentation by talking about the upcoming phase 2 clinical study that we are ready to enroll patients in. So without further ado, I'll just dive into that. I already alluded that the interest in Pitolisant preceded the formation of the company. There were several pediatric patients that were treated with Pitolisant on a personal importation program from Europe, and FDA allowed that to happen. And again, the company was formed in October 2017, and already in December 2017, Jeff Dano, together with some patient organizations, went to visit the National Institute of Health, and they discussed the registry, and they discussed some additional publication or additional initiatives to be done in that particular patient population. Not much longer afterwards, we kind of knew about this interest, and we decided, and we attended the 2018 annual meeting that was in Las Vegas, and that's kind of when we met first with you, Susan, and with Teresa, and with key members of the foundation. We listened. We were more kind of in the learning mode back in 2018. And then beginning of 2019, we actually made a decision to do a formal development program, and we started working with the FDA. We did a pre-IND application. We'd opened an IND. We submitted a draft protocol. We heard the FDA comments. So again, it was a very busy time between April and October. We had to majorly change the initial protocol that we were thinking, but again, we landed in a pretty good place. We feel very happy with what we have as a current protocol. Then in October, we came to this next meeting, which was in New Orleans, and we are already known there. We presented our tentative study design, and we did understand that there was a lot of interest in Pitolisant, and I'll talk about like why and how our program is slightly different than other programs. We're not even talking about hyperphagia here. Meanwhile, we had the opportunity to actually do a PK study in these 10 kids that were treated with the personal importation program. That was an opportunistic approach. We know that in pediatric, you know very little about your drugs. So again, we reached out to the patient population. They were interested in, most of them were interested in participating. We did the PK study, and then we had an open label safety study. that was the follow-up, and we are happy to report that we are still have ongoing patients in that. And now we are on the verge of having patients in the phase 2 program, and I'll talk a little more about this program later on. Let me then focus on what is pitolisant and how does it work. So pitolisant is a new mechanism of action. Again, nobody has developed a drug targeting histamine and being a histamine receptor antagonist, H3. And the way our drug works is that it increases the histamine levels in the brain through two distinct mechanisms. One is to increase the synthesis of histamine in the brain, and then the other, which is complementary to the first, is to actually increase the signaling in the synaptic cleft. Histamine is a major wake-promoting neurotransmitter in the brain. It does help stabilize states of sleep and wakefulness. And I'll talk more about that when we go to the mechanism of action. A little bit of a history about the drug. The drug was discovered in France, and it was developed by our partner, Bioprojet. And the scientific director of the company has been part of the closely involved with the discovery of the histamine 3 receptor. So you can imagine that there was a lot of passion and a lot of scientific interest in developing pitolisant and getting approved. They put together a narcolepsy development program. The studies were conducted in Europe, and finally pitolisant was approved in March 2016 for the treatment of narcolepsy in adult patients with or without cataplexy, and I'll talk more about that as well. Then our company was formed. We were formed for the US rights, and we submitted the file. We worked with the FDA, and the drug was approved in August 2019 for treatment of excessive daytime sleepiness in adult patients with narcolepsy. And as of last week, we were approved actually for the second indication, the treatment of cataplexy in adult patients with narcolepsy. Initially, the FDA did not grant us the first indication, but we were happy to report that the drug was approved for cataplexy as well. The one outside of the different mechanism of action, which is the histaminergic mechanism of action, the other thing that makes pitolisant unique is that it is not scheduled. It is not a scheduled drug. So this is the first wake-promoting agent that is not scheduled by the DEA. And that makes a lot of, that actually is very appealing to physicians and families, because again, dealing with a scheduled drug requires a lot of efforts from the physician who is prescribing and on the side of the families. The dosing scheme is relatively easy. It's once a day tablet. You have to take it in the morning upon awakening. And the therapeutic dose range that was approved for narcolepsy was 17.8 to 35.6 milligrams. Again, the decimal points in the milligram tablets, they came from the FDA guidance that you need to report just the active moiety in a tablet, not the salt. So that's why we ended up with doses that are not easy to pronounce and remember, but again, this is what it is. So the drug is relatively well tolerated. We did see a pretty good persistence in the clinical studies. We did see very low rate of discontinuations. But again, as every drug, it has side effects. And the most common side effect was headache. But again, you see these that were more than placebo. Again, headache was the highest, the most common adverse event, and it was reported in like 2 or 3% more on the pitolisant versus placebo group. So that's why it doesn't make it to that list. But again, headache is the most common, and then insomnia, nausea, and anxiety are the next three adverse events that patients have reported in clinical trials, and you can see that they are both in a low, relatively low single-digit numbers. So now I'll talk a little bit about histamine, because again, people always tend to relate histamine to allergies, and this is something which is a very different approach. Again, it's a chemical in our body that mediates many different functions. And again, there are mainly three types of histamine receptors. Of course, as science evolves, there are more that are being discovered. So the histamine 1 receptors, and those are the ones that people are very familiar, because they are the ones that are the main culprits with allergic reactions. And again, they are mainly located in the skin, mucous membranes, and blood vessels throughout the body. And when you have a lot of histamine that binds to the H1 receptors, you can see an increase in allergic reaction, which is rash, swelling, and that's why antihistamines were developed to actually decrease the histamine levels in the peripheral, in the blood, and therefore lower allergic reactions. The histamine 2 receptors, they are located mainly in the stomach and the GI tract. They are responsible for acid production and digestion. Many of you have heard about the histamine 2 receptor blockers that are anti-ulcer medications. And then the histamine 3 receptors that are relatively new, they were discovered not that long ago. They're mainly represented in the CNS, in the brain. And the level of histamine in the brain is actually directly linked to wake promotion. And this is a major wake promoting neurotransmitter. It works very closely with another wake promoting neurotransmitter, which is orexin, and they have complementary function. And in narcolepsy, the lack of orexin actually is kind of the lead reason for the sleepiness, and histamine in a way can quote unquote compensate for the low orexin levels. I'll keep going, talking a little bit more about histamine. So again, it controls many different brain functions based on the location of the H3 receptors. And you can see that actually H3 receptors are located in multiple regions of the brain. And but again, a main function of histamine is wakefulness. And the sleep-wake switch is located in the hypothalamus. And again, I already touched on the interplay between orexin and histamine. And that's how actually the interplay in between these two major metabolites keep people awake. And again, when the time comes for sleep, again, they activate the other brain regions that actually promote sleep. So again, what histamine does is promote wake promotion and inhibition of sleep promotion. Again, other function of histamines are that are beyond wake promotion are attention, vigilance, cognition, and some emotional control of behavioral processing. Histamine 3 receptors have been linked to consolidation of memory. And again, there is not a lot, but some evidence of control of hunger and satiety. The other thing which is worth remembering, because we do get questions about allergies and histamine 3 receptors. Again, they are mainly located in the brain, and there are very limited distribution of H3 receptors outside of the CNS. So Again, this is a very complicated slide, fairly kind of, because the sleep-wake regulation is very complex. There are multiple neurotransmitters, multiple regions of the brain working in close relationship with each other, so that when you activate the wake-promoting regions of the brain, you make sure that you inhibit the sleep-promoting, so that when people are awake, they're not the sleep promoting agents are inhibited. So again, it all happens in the hypothalamus. This is a key brain region, and histamine works by activating the wake promoting regions of the brain and by inhibiting the sleep promoting regions. And again, sleep is mainly divided into two major type of sleep, REM sleep and non-REM sleep. And the other thing that histamine does, not directly and indirectly, it activates the cerebral cortex, therefore the link to cognition and the link to the memory and other processing function. So I already touched about the interplay between histamine and hypocretin. They are located in very close proximity in the hypothalamus, and again, decreased level of histamine and hypocretin result in sleep-wake state instability and in a decreased activation of cerebral cortex, and therefore decreased attention and excessive daytime sleepiness as well. So again, as I spoke about histamine and hypocretin, you can probably already see the link and the connection between histamine and Prader-Willi and the kind of the scientific, the mechanical link. So again, when you see a hypothalamic dysfunction, you can see a lot of functions, of biological functions changing. So again, you can see some dysregulation of hunger satiety, you can see some hyperphagia. Again, you know, this is a well-known fact in the sleep literature that if you don't sleep well, you tend to eat more, and that's all kind of linked to the leptin levels, and there is a whole science right there. And then there is the sleep-wake state instability that is manifested not just with excessive daytime sleepiness, but disrupted nighttime sleep and impaired attention, because if you don't get enough sleep or your sleep is not good, then again, cognition and attention suffer as a result of that. Again, when you talk about Prader-Willi, you can see a lot of other hypothalamic changes that are linked to the hypothalamic dysregulation, which is growth hormone release, disruption in various endocrine functions, metabolism, body temperature. I'm sure you're very familiar with that. So again, when we were thinking about pitolisant and how can pitolisant actually impact patients with Prader-Willi, we realized that there are multiple factors into the excessive daytime sleepiness in Prader-Willi patients. The one being sleep-wake state instability, as we already spoke. We know that OSA is widely prevalent in Prader-Willi patients. We know that some of the Prader-Willi patients have central hypoventilation, and we know that even some of the Prader-Willi patients are formally diagnosed with narcolepsy, although there are some differences between the narcolepsy manifestation and Prader-Willi. So thinking about these multiple links, we made the decision that actually pitolisant can be a viable drug to study in excessive daytime sleepiness with patients with Prader-Willi. Again, we know from the literature that there were some abnormalities in the hypothalamus with patients with Prader-Willi. We know that some of the patients with Prader-Willi have lower orexin levels. We have done some preclinical studies that display the phenotype of Prader-Willi, and we did demonstrate that there is some impairment in the hypocretin system and sleep-wake state instability, and that pitolisant was actually helping with excessive daytime sleepiness in these preclinical models. So again, based on the literature, based on what is available about the link between hypocretin histamine and pitolisant, we believe that this might be a viable, a good treatment option for patients with Prader-Willi. So now I'll start talking about the study. I think some of you may have seen that design. The study, as I said, is already on the clinicaltrial.gov, and we have 1 or 2 sites that are ready to enroll patients. We started the real development for pitolisant with a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled, parallel group study, and the study will be followed by a long-term extension. We have planned to enroll approximately 60 patients, ages 6 to 65, and we'll have a duration of 11-week double-blind treatment, which will include 3 weeks of titration and 8 weeks of stable dosing. And once the double-blind treatment is over, patients will be offered to continue on the open-label extension study. We have 3 age groups. We have children, adolescent, and adults, and we do have high and low dose for each of these groups. Again, the dose selection was based on the approved dose for narcolepsy. So we know that in narcolepsy, 17.8 and 35.6 work for improving excessive daytime sleepiness, and we did model the same exposure into the younger age group, and that's how we ended up with the different dose ranges for children and adolescents. But again, they are all modeled to align with the dose that we know that work in narcolepsy. So the primary objective of the study is to study the safety and efficacy of pitolisant compared to placebo in EDS. We are focusing on excessive daytime sleepiness in a large age group population, 6 to 65. And because of all the anecdotal results and published materials that we hear, we decided to look beyond sleepiness, and again, we'll have clinician rated impressions on the overall clinical status, and we'll have caregiver impression on the sleepiness on patients with Prader-Willi as well. Beyond sleepiness, we are going to look on behavioral symptoms, cognitive function, and overall caregiver burden. And again, we'll talk more about the study design, and we'll go way more into the details on our webinar that we are going to have on November 16th. So again, we invite you to kind of come and join us and ask questions on that. And again, the exploratory objectives are the ESS chat, sleep, actigraphy, and hyperphagia and ghrelin. Again, there is some evidence in the literature. If we find signal there, it would be great. If not, we'll at least know that we have looked at. So these are key inclusion and exclusion criteria. Again, the primary endpoint will be MSLT. And based on the MSLT primary endpoint, we actually have some key inclusion exclusion criteria. Again, thinking about if you are on hormone treatments, to make sure that you are on a stable dose for a period of time, so that your hormone treatment doesn't interfere with your sleep pattern. Again, for appetite, because we are looking at behavioral endpoints, again, we would like for you to be in a stable pattern and not have any major changes in your appetite, treatments or medications. If we would like, again, because it's a sleep study, we are looking at sleepiness, patients will have to wash out from the wake promoting medications. And for the double-blind portion of the study, that includes the stimulants and modafinil, Centaur modafinil. But again, we do allow the reinitiation of wake-promoting medication in the open-label study. We would like for the patients to have a constant caregiver because we have some key secondary endpoint based on caregiver assessment of sleepiness. Again, the exclusion criteria, some of them are driven by making sure that if a patient have obstructed sleep apnea, they have been compliant with their treatment and they still have residual daytime sleepiness. We have some exclusion criteria about mean total sleep time because, again, we don't want you to be sleepy because you didn't sleep enough the night before. So again, these are all the exclusion that we put together and the reason behind. Participation in another investigational trial, we do not allow that in the double-blind part of the study. It will be allowed in the open label. So again, if you are on an open label extension on another investigational product, you'll have to discontinue or temporarily interrupt that medication for the double-blind portion of the study, and you may reinitiate that in the open label. QTC and TCG is mainly driven by our label in narcolepsy. And again, the rest is, again, based on our label and drug-drug interaction. We limit certain medications, and we pay very close attention at seizure disorders. This is the map. These are the sites that we are currently contemplating. Texas Children is almost ready to screen their first patient, and the other are closely following them. So we hope to have all the sites open by the end of the year, at the latest in January of 2021. So I think I would like to finish my presentation to summarize what we just spoke about. First-in-class medicine that works on increasing histamine levels in the brain. Histamine is produced in the hypothalamus. It is a major wake-promoting chemical in the brain, and it also helps stabilize states of sleep and wakefulness. And as Prader-Willi is a disorder of the hypothalamic dysfunction, EDS is a common symptom, so we would like to study pitolisant in EDS in patients with Prader-Willi, and we know that EDS may also impact other aspects of the disease, such as behavioral symptoms and cognition. And we have initiated the phase 2 study in patients in Prader-Willi ages 6 to 65 to investigate the safety and efficacy of pitolisant in treatment of EDS and other symptoms. Thank you very much, and I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Albana, for that wonderful presentation. Could you review some of the side effects that people might expect if they were to take pitolisant?
Yeah, with pleasure. I mean, I briefly touched on them. Again, the most common is headache. We had about 17% headache in the active arm in the narcolepsy program, and about 15 on the placebo. So again, a lot of placebo headache, but we still had a headache as a most common adverse event. So if you take pitolisant, you might experience headache. The other three most common side effects were directly related to the mechanism of action. So we had seen some insomnia, we had seen a single-digit number, we had seen anxiety, and we had seen increased heart rate. So again, those have been the most, all of them like 4 to 6% at the most in the clinical development program of narcolepsy.
Sure. And for our participants or people attending today who would like to participate in the study or learn more, when will this study be open?
So as I said, we are almost open. We have our first site ready to screen patients, which is the Texas Children's Hospital. And we do have another site. All the sites should be open by the end of the year, in January at the latest of 2021. You can go back to the slide with the map and see who is the closest site and who is the closest place to you, or you can give us a call. We do have a contact, and we do have an email address that's actually, you can reach out to us, and we are happy to working with you and direct you to the site, the closest site that's open and can actually see you.
Great. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Dr. Petronova for joining us today and telling us more about the phase 2 study of Pitolisant. As you mentioned, if you would like more information about this study or any other PWS studies, you can always go to clinicaltrials.gov. You can also visit the fpwr.org website and click on clinical trials for a list of all of the currently enrolling PWS studies. On the FPWR website, you will find recruitment information for each study, the locations that are available, as well as contact information so that you can reach out directly to study representatives. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.